Hey Ravens. Um, for starters, I want to apologize for the lack of a Tarot Tuesday video this week. As you can hear, I'm at the tail end of getting over a sickness. So I'm working my way back through that, but I did not want to let the weekend go by without talking about a super, super important event that is going on starting tomorrow and probably lasting. The effects of this are probably going to be the most significant now, but the chain reaction of things they're going to cause is probably likely to be felt throughout most of the decade. So if you were looking to start the 20s off with a bang, congratulations, you get your wish. I'm going to do my real quick plug just because it makes a nice segue. So, obviously, if you're seeing this video early, if you're seeing it on Saturday, you're already a Patreon subscriber. If you're not seeing it until Sunday, you should be. For one, you would have gotten access to this video early, but it also gets you things like the Night Sky newsletter, which I write every month. Certain patrons at higher level tiers get a monthly reading from me, a personalized horoscope. As 2020 rolls on, there will be other benefits getting added to Patreon. Not immediately, but those are in the works for expansions to tiers and other cool things that we can do either one-on-one or as a group of me and all of you who choose to subscribe through Patreon. So I think you should check that out. It's going to be worth your time, especially as the year wears on, because you'll be the one in on the ground floor for the new stuff. But speaking of the Night Sky newsletter, for those of you who read it a lot, I've been alluding to this quite a little bit over the last year as Saturn and Pluto approach their conjunction. Now, it just so happens to be timed to where all of this is happening in Capricorn. Capricorn, as you know well from my Tarot Tuesday videos, is represented by the Devil card. So it has a lot to do with structures, restrictions, both those imposed from without and the ones imposed from within. So we're either going to be finding that there are some chains we can't break or some that are long overdue for breaking as a result of these aspects. Excuse me. If we turn to the planets themselves, we have the Sun, represented by the Sun, which is kind of boring. Mercury, represented by the Magician. Saturn, which represents the world. And Pluto, which is represented by Judgment. Now, one of the interesting things that I kind of want to point out about all of this is that if you look at these cards and you take their numerical values, for example, we'll start with the Sun. The Sun is 19, XIX. If you add Mercury to the Sun, which is 19 and 1, you get 20, which is Judgment and Pluto. If you then add the Magician to that, you get 20 and 1, which is 21, which is Saturn, represented by the world. So there's a lot of this is intensely astrological and numerological, astrologically and numerologically rather significant transit. This is a really big thing that's going on. Now it does involve a luminary, but also a couple of planets that are sort of farther reaching. The Trans-Jovian planets, Saturn, but especially Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are more generational than personal. You're really not going to get a whole lot of mileage out of this individually unless something about this reading is powerfully placed, heavily aspected, or part of your chart for real. So for those of us who have Capricorn rising, and I do say us because I'm one of them, I confirmed that recently, actually getting an accurate birth time for my birth certificate. That makes Saturn your ruling planet, unless it's displaced by something else. So, for those of you with Capricorn rising, this is going to be taking place probably in your first house, maybe in your 12th, depending on what degree the ascendant is at. But unless you're lucky like me and it's occurring right over top of your your ascendant, if you have an ascendant between 20 and 24 degrees of Capricorn, this is occurring right on top of you. This is occurring in the same place as the moment of your birth. So it's going to be incredibly personally transformative for me and those like me. But again, your rising sign will help you determine what house that's in, and what this big transit is going to affect. But they are all interwoven very, very tightly. It's a conjunction, again, both in astrology and in numbers. So again, the force of this is great. But the Saturn Pluto part of it, which is sort of the prime mover of it all, really only makes this leap once every 30. I want to say 37 or 38 years. Roughly speaking, the last one was in 1982, so 38 years. Um, and the last one was like I said, was in November of 1982. And so, because like I said, these are generational aspects, we have to look also not just at individuals, but at the generational stuff. And it's this that I'd like to talk about first and get out of the way, because of the two, it's by far the scarier. We can interpret the cards for individual people, but for society as a whole, what we're dealing with is something much, much grander. So, with Capricorn, with Saturn, with Pluto, a lot of what we're dealing with is social and societal and governmental in nature. A lot of what this transit is likely going to affect has to do with our notions of power and government and rulership and who is doing what, where, and when, and with what. Um, Sorry. Like I say, getting over the tail end of being sick. Bear with me. Now, so the one of the not the now so it's only conjunct in the same sign about every 700 or so years. Uh, Again, that can vary slightly. But one of the last times it was conjunct in Capricorn was in the 13th century, and the Venetians coined the gold ducat. Back then, Venice was an independent kingdom, and the gold ducat, that gold coin, became sort of the monetary lingua franca of all of Europe. And also the region originally called the Levant, which is in the Middle East. It's excuse me, Israel and the surrounding countries. Or, well, I prefer Palestine. We can argue about that later. Um, and so it's our approaches to what is power and in whose hands is it coalesced. What is power and who's got it, basically. But if we turn our eyes to the most recent conjunction of of Saturn and Pluto, which was in Libra in the 80s, in 82, you have a number of things. You have the escalation of the Cold War and the threat of nuclear annihilation, or what was it? Mutually assured destruction. You also have the Yuri Andropov came to power in the Soviet Union in November of 1982. Um, he would go on to inspire further Soviet politicians, including one by the name of Mikhail Gorbachev, which, for those of you who don't remember that from your history classes, he was the last premier of the Soviet Union. He oversaw the breakup of the USSR into Russia and Ukraine and all of the other former satellite Soviet countries. Um, the breakup of the Eastern Bloc, as it were. Um, so you have, again, these things that, like, they cascade way farther out from this than just the event itself. Um, Worth noting, though, that Yuri Andropov came to power in the Soviet Union 4 days after the conjunction was perfected in 82. So, again, it's a direct consequence of what happened, although the other aspects will have obviously played a role as time went on. But also in 82, the Space Shuttle Challenger was first mounted to a rocket. For those of you, again, if you didn't live it or you don't remember your history classes, the Challenger space shuttle would go on to explode and kill the 7 astronauts aboard 4 years later in 1986. So when I say this is a cascading effect, anything that happens now will continue to happen later. Like, this is not a one and done deal. It's setting the stage for something big. It doesn't have to be cataclysmic. It doesn't have to be terrible. It is going to seem that way, because again in 1982 you had the nuclear scares, all those videos about how the world was going to end. How you would have, like, basically, if you heard the air raid siren, it meant you had 4 minutes to live because the bombs were coming. So there's always sort of this doomsayery kind of feeling to a excuse me for a second, dropped a card on the floor. To the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. Luckily, you have Mercury in the mix, and also the Sun, a very beneficent planet, helping to soften this. It does seem to me that this is ultimately going to be more of the chain breaking in terms of Capricorn than the chain forging. At least I would hope so. For all that I talk about how real truth comes from darkness, that's never stopped me from being an optimist. But it does mean that there are going to be fundamental shifts. Things are going to change in a really big way. This is the Tower. This is death. This is, in terms of tarot cards without astrological associations, it is sweeping, fundamental. The world is not the same after this kind of change. Now, with the political climate being what it is, I'm not here to inspire terror in you. I'm not telling you that it's time to build a bunker in your backyard and wait for World War III to start. I don't think it's that grave or that desperate. I feel like most of these changes, especially for Americans, because we have Pluto and Capricorn, America is getting very, very close to its Pluto return. Which only occurs once every 273 years or so, I think. We're almost there. This is going to be the beginning of a profound shift that either sees okay, so there are a couple different ways to put this, and I'm just going to lay them out on the table for you. Again, not to be a doomsayer, just to kind of illuminate the landscape as I see it in light of the current political climate, the current astrological climate, etc., etc. But this is going to be the beginning, the very first thrust of what will need to be major reform in the next 2 or 3 decades. If we take 273 years as the exact timeline and pin it to that number, We're looking at, let's see, we're looking at 2049 for a Pluto return for the United States, roughly speaking. It's probably not right around there, but it will be within those couple of years. So we've got, like I say, 2 or 3 decades to start either making major reforms or watching the sort of grand experiment that is the United States break into pieces and dissolve. The reason that I say grand experiment, and this comes more from my historical and philosophical knowledge than anything from astrology. The United States is the first nation in the modern era to be founded on democratic principles. I won't say as a democracy because we're not. We're a republic. There's a difference. But it is founded on democratic principles to begin with. We were not originally a monarchy that overthrew its king or queen or ruling whomever and install a democracy in its ashes. We're not England, who still has a monarchy. We're not France. Excuse me. Any of these countries where there used to be a king and then there was a revolution and now there's not a king anymore. We didn't do that. We rebelled against the king to become an entirely separate nation. I guess in that respect you could argue that we're the truly democratic outgrowth of England, but that's a whole other topic. Sticking to the astrology, this is the beginning, like I say, of probably 30 years where we're going to need to start making some major sweeping changes or else watch this grand experiment collapse. Because it's increasingly clear if you look at the political landscape that the country has never been more divided other than during the Civil War where it literally broke in half. But it's so polarized. Everyone is so ready to go for the jugular in every dispute of opinion or difference in political ideology. I myself am not immune to this. I have been that person. I am still that person. But it's this polarized absolutist kind of thing that is either going to force us to come back to the middle and work to make it better, or else rip it apart completely. And it's ultimately, I would like to say that we're going to get the best result out of that we can. But you can make a little good out of a lot of bad. You can also make a lot of good out of a little bad. But that's sort of the way that I see this going. It's just going to be shades of how much change are we willing to tolerate before the majority of people hit the brakes, and then did we go far enough to survive? So now that the doom prophecy is out of the way, I will say that it is also likely to expose further corruption, further misuse or outright abuse of power by those who wield it. So, like the things like, and again, you're seeing it cascade into all kinds of different places in life. The more that you pay attention to, the farther afield this seems to travel. We had the Me Too movement. There's all of a sudden been this rash of accusations in professional hockey of coaches abusing players and just rampant mistreatment of minorities in what is a very white sport. But it's everywhere, right? You've got the cheating things in baseball with the stealings of call signs. And that's just sports. This is just pop culture. Leaving aside all of the accusations that are being levied at practically every politician of gross misuse of their power. Some more naked than others, some much more obvious than others. But these revelations are going to continue as a result of this. We have not yet learned all of the evil that slumbers under the guise of uh, leaders elected democratically or otherwise. And again, I only have the American frame of reference for this. I don't know what's going on in Canada, England, France, Russia, Australia, the bushfires. Um, but you can also expect think global topics in part of this. Climate change, it's a big one. Look out for the FRB and the IMF. If you don't know what those are, look them up. Although I will tell you, the FRB is the American Federal Reserve Bank. The IMF is the International Monetary Fund, which is also called the World Bank. Look for changes in those structures as we begin to see what's really happening. I personally would like to see more fallout from the Panama Papers from a year or two ago, because nothing happened with that other than the journalist who reported on it got killed. But you can come in if you want to, sweetie. Hi, baby. Okay, so this video has gotten hotly and violently political for my taste, so I'm going to leave it at that. But that is sort of you have to deal with the current climate, and that's where we are, especially in the States. Turning to a more individual approach to what this means, again, expect a lot of your relationship to power structures to change. Excuse me. Coke does that to me every time. This Coke, for the record, not the other stuff. You can expect, again, lots of changes to your own individual like notion of power and approach to it and response to it. Cats, man. To be different, whether you want it, how you react to the people who have it in certain places of authority over you. And again, with Mercury and the Sun there, bringing this to a personal level, it may be that you get a new boss, or become the boss, or both. Maybe, because Capricorn is the ruler of the 10th house and oversees career, you might see a change in workplace, a change in career, either within an institution or by stepping out of that role and into one somewhere else. You may find that a relationship that you're in where the power dynamic has been lopsided starts to even out or else break apart. Saturn and Pluto together will also do that. You will either find ways to make more effective the things that serve you, or else cast aside the ones that don't. So be prepared for that, because it does mean that a lot of things are going to change for you by virtue of leaving your life. Just gone. Which is a good thing. It's not... Not to say that it won't be painful. Not to say that, you won't have to do some learning and growing from it, because we all do. But it's not going to hurt more than you can handle, even if it takes you all the way to the limit of what you can handle. The important thing to remember about this is that it is just a transit, and on a personal level, it is going to pass much, much more quickly than it will on the collective level. So although we're all going to be laboring under this for quite a while, individually we will only be dealing with it for maybe the next month or so. Um, by the time February gets here, for certain by the end of the year, Saturn and Pluto will no longer be in the same sign. Saturn will have progressed to Aquarius, and this will be behind us as individuals. Um, in fact, you can probably expect this to probably only last through the spring, maybe through the start of Aries season, before it wanes entirely, if it has not already, by the middle of March, the beginning of April. On the personal level, again, like I say, this is likely to last for. It could be 5, 6 years, who knows, before the full weight of what Saturn and Pluto have to show us and the brilliant light that the sun and the minute focus of Mercury as a magnifying glass are casting on this. However, like I say, there is something more individual to it. So, we're going to do this a little bit differently than we normally do as far as drawing the cards, because I do want to give you some hope and some advice for how to deal with this. I'm not going to leave you thinking this is all doom and gloom, because I don't want to. It will be hard. You will have to work. It is going to hurt. It will be worth it. But maybe I can give you some signposts. So, instead of doing this by sun sign, I'm going to do it by rising sign. If you don't know your rising sign, I do birth charts. Hit me up. I'll be more than happy to help you try to figure out what your rising sign is, although I do need an accurate birth time for that, so keep that in mind. If you don't know what time you were born at, it will be more difficult for me to help you. But we will do the draw in the same order. So, Capricorn rising, my folks. The Ace of Wands. So out of all this Capricorn rising, what you can expect is the beginning of some new, the kindling of a new fire, some new passion project or some new pursuit, some new way to grow, particularly either intellectually or spiritually rather than physically. Again, this has to do with quickness and speed, and so I definitely get the feeling that this is more of an intellectual or spiritual pursuit that all this is kindling for you. You're going to be leaving behind aspects of those things that no longer serve you. Again, casting off the things that just, they hold you down. They're dead weight around your ankles, your wrists, your neck. And they don't serve anymore. You might turn to a new field of study or broaden your spiritual practice, maybe convert to a new religion. Who knows? But you're getting the first inklings that something new is on the horizon for you, and it's time to let the old thing go. For Aquarius rising signs, we have the Queen of Cups. It would behoove you, Aquarius rising, to learn to detach some of your emotions from how do I phrase this better? Things don't always go the way you planned, and that's okay. but you gotta not attach so much of your emotions, Aquarius rising, to the way you want things to go, especially while Saturn and Pluto are holding court, because they're not going to let you get everything that you want. Um, this is sort of a Rolling Stones thing for you in that you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you find you get what you need. This is one of those things for you. It's just you're going to have to learn as a byproduct of this process to learn to keep yourself from overly emotionally identifying with the desired results of the actions that you take. Worth noting, fixed water represents Scorpio, which is square to you. So again, this is not, again, like I say, this is going to be something that you have to work at for everybody. Not just for you, Aquarius rising, I promise. For Pisces rising signs, we have the Six of Cups. Interestingly, in a time of releasing what no longer serves, we have a card of nostalgia. So for you, Pisces rising, this actually is a good time to look back. Probably about 11 years ago or so, the last time that Saturn and Pluto made a major aspect, 2008, 2009, and recapture the good in your life that was going on then. Because it's not that which is toxic or no longer serves for you, but the things that have accrued to it in the decades since then. You have allowed, or maybe not even allowed, but just through the happenstance of reality as it is, things have attached to you as a result of that event that have sort of misdirected you away from it. And it's time to sort of prune those unhealthy branches off of the tree that is this thing. But you are being given a unique opportunity to recapture some old magic and enhance it. That does mean, though, hacking away at the overgrowth between you and it to get back to it. For Aries rising signs, we have the moon. For those of you with natural charts, which is those in which it looks like the one back there on the wall, roughly. Okay, so they have this different than it should be. That's based on a regular calendar, it looks like. But Aries is the ruler of the first house, or associated with the first house, in what's called the natural chart, which is what you have. Where first house ruled by Aries, second ruled by Taurus, third ruled by Gemini, so on and so forth. For you, it is going to be incredibly important to follow this transit, the Saturn and Pluto conjunction, as it waxes and wanes, because with the retrograding, it will get close to being back in orb. And at those periods where Saturn and Pluto come the closest together again, are where you in particular are going to feel this the most strongly. So this is going to very kind of delayed ripple effect for you, Aquarius, in a way that Aries rising, in a way that a lot of the rest of us won't get, where whatever happens to you this weekend will reach successively lower peaks, but it will peak again every so often as the year progresses until, like I say, Saturn passes into Aquarius and levels it off. But you'll get the most out of the recurrence periods rather than the rest of us. Now, when I say the most, I don't necessarily mean the best. I just mean this energy is going to rear its head for you a couple of times. Speaking as an Aries sun, that may be because you're embracing too much of the Arian tendency to charge in head first and not look before you leap. But again, this is the moon. It's about phases. It's about changes. And you may find that the end of 2020 finds you a much different person than the start has. But again, change and growth are not necessarily evils. Especially, I don't think, with the sun being present in this grand conjunction that we've got going on. For Taurus rising signs, we have the Eight of Pentacles. And again, just hard work. Luckily, you're a Taurus, which means that when you need to take the yoke and pull the plow, you will do it. It is tough to get you moving. Not as tough as a Taurus sun, but you are a Taurus rising, so a lot of that is still there. It might be tough to get you moving, but you are one of the best Taurus rising for nose to the grindstone when it's needed. And whenever you come to the realization, and I think you will soon, you can see that the symbol for Saturn is, there we go, actually featured in this card. Once you realize where the work needs to be put in, Taurus rising, you will lower your head and get to work. And that's a good thing. So just be watchful for those places where this transit impacts you the most directly, and then just go to ground. For Gemini rising, we have the Princess of Swords. Winter. To me, this is a card. To me, the Princess of Swords in this card, Gemini rising, looks like she's dreaming of a far-off spring, and I feel like that's particularly profound and appropriate for you because you rule over the greenest part of spring. Gemini rising. Gemini is as a sun sign runs from May to June, the greenest part of spring. This is where everything is bursting into life and flower and green and it's all of the beauty of summer without all of the negative things like heat and humidity and mosquitoes and grossness. I may be an Aries sun, but I never said I wasn't a child of winter. And so again, it's you already, Gemini rising, have an eye to what lies beyond the effects of this transit. But be careful not to spend so much time thinking about what comes after that you fail to do anything with what is directly in front of you. To borrow from a sports analogy, you have to win in the first round of the playoffs to even think about playing for the championship. And so that's where you're at. It's fine to dream of better days and better things, but you have to do the work to bring them to you. They don't come on their own. For Cancer rising, we have the Three of Pentacles. There's another card about hard work. Although the Three of Pentacles implies it's something that you build together with others, which suits you, Cancer rising. The rising sign makes you outwardly nurturing and maternal. Which may or may not, cascade all the way inwards. I find that often it does. But this is about coming together with others and building something together with other people. I also get the feeling that that involves stepping outside of your comfort zone, though. Um, it is you are going to have to sort of transmute yourself in order to do this. And the reason that I use the word transmute is because Mercury is present in this card along with Capricorn. Um, so yeah, you're gonna have to let go of some ideas of what you are in relation to the thing that you're building with other people. You're gonna have to change your notion of how you fit in with that group and what your role in it is. And again, because this is Saturn conjunct Pluto that we're talking about, you may find that there are some groups with which you no longer wish to affiliate, and it's time to find a new one. For Leo rising, another very appropriate card, because again, Leo and the Sun both here. We have the Four of Wands. Um, this is such a happy card for such a dense conglomeration of astrological aspects, because the Four of Wands is a card of celebrations. You know, it's a wedding. It's a birth. It's a grand. It brings. It's a groundswell of community. Not in the same way that Cancer rising is the Three of Pentacles, where they're building a new community. Um, this is rather taking that sense of community up a step. You know, this grand surge of joyful coming together. It may be that the only way I can really parse this for you, Leo rising, is that you're finally cutting away all of the unhealthy relationships that you have, such that you free up a ton of your time and emotional energy and space for the really valuable ones. Um, Yours might just be the best of the diamonds in the rough this grand configuration sort of entails for all of us on the individual level is some sort of diamond in the rough. Yours might be the largest of the diamonds in the rough, or the various things that make diamonds flashy and pretty. Pick your favorite stone if you don't like diamonds. It's just an analogy. But yeah, it seems as though, like, on an interpersonal level, from what I'm hearing from this card, is that you have to do the most clearing away, but you also stand to gain the most as a result of that. Your ruler, the Sun, is also a part of this aspect, so that might be, weirdly, instead of illuminating this, it might actually be muddying the waters. But either way, we'll go on to Virgo rising, who has the Wheel of Fortune, which is Jupiter. Jupiter is also not that far off from this conjunction, since we're talking about it, and it will make contact with both Saturn and Pluto over the course of this year. Those are both going to be big conjunctions, but we'll talk about them as they approach. Jupiter and I think Pluto don't even conjunct until April 5th, which is my birthday, yay me. But for Virgo rising, the presence of Jupiter and the Wheel of Fortune, especially with the fact that Jupiter is coming into play later in the year, is the promise that this is sort of, the Wheel of Fortune represents, fate and like positive and negative, the swing back and forth between poles, and how this too shall pass is a good way to sum it up. The unfortunate thing about its presence here is that does mean that this is the bottoming out for you, Virgo. But what it does mean is that following this, everything is an upswing. Jupiter's presence for you here indicates that yes, things are rough now, and yes, You're in the thick of it, but it is getting better. You are working your way through it as long as you continue to do the work. I cannot stress that enough. For everybody, this is not going to be easy. But then, nothing that's worth it ever is. So hang in there, Virgo rising. You're going to be okay. For Libra rising signs, we have the Ace of Pentacles, and there we've got Saturn and Capricorn again. And where Capricorn rising got, the beginning of some new pursuit, some new... I keep leaning on spiritual for Capricorn rising rather than intellectual, but it could be either one. For you, Libra, this is something material in nature. Something much more physical. It may be that, the last time these planets were conjunct was in your rising sign. Now they're conjunct in Capricorn, your cardinal cousin in the earth signs. And it might be that you're getting... Something about it feels karmic. Just in general. And, you're getting your due in a material sense, Libra. What you've been waiting for, what you've been working for, you will have to do more work for it, but you are getting it as a result of this, finally. The thing about Saturn is that he also represents obstacles, obstructions, and delays. And Pluto sort of catalyzes those. But the thing about dragging them to a material level is that it also transforms them. And maybe it's this that finally makes them surmountable for you. The sort of the change of the tide that you needed in order to finally make it over these hurdles to get the thing you wanted. So it's this thing of fall down. For you, Libra rising, it's fall down 7 times, stand up 8. I think you're on the 7th fall, so now you need to make the 8th rise. I think that analogy holds. I'm going on to the next one either way. Scorpio rising has the 6 of Swords. To take all that is worth taking and go. For once, a simple read, because this is really easy. Take the 6 of Swords. Take everything that's still valuable, take everything that still serves you, and leave all the rest behind. Cut it all out. Now, that's not to say that the doing of that will be easy. This is something that is much, much more easily spoken of than done. But that's what you are called to do, encouraged to do. The energy is there for you to do it, Scorpio, is just to cut it away. Identify the things that serve. I get the feeling there aren't very many, and cut all the rest aside. Cast it all away. Leave it all behind you. This involves a lot of movement, though. This is like it isn't just movement to a new living space or movement to a new workplace or movement to a new relationship or past a certain friend group or social circle or affiliation with any other group. Like any and all of these things that do not serve need to be cast aside. It's a profound breaking of the chains for you. And last, but most certainly not least, are those for whom the Archer is rising, Sagittarius rising signs. You have the 10 of Swords. And again, we're all, as a result of where Saturn and Pluto are, going to be casting things aside. That much is not an issue for anyone. You're doing it, Sagittarius rising, and so are all the other. So is everyone else around you. We're all going through it. No one is immune to casting aside what needs to be cast aside. But for you, there is something intensely final about this Sagittarius rising. It is the end. Full stop. Whatever is left behind will not be returned to. This is not something you are going to want, need, or ask for back. It is over. It is done with. You are leaving it behind forever. This is the end of a really, really big cycle for you. Which also, by the same token, means that it is the start of a really big cycle for you. This is... especially because it'll be occurring in your second house, most likely, although maybe your first. This is going to be a total reinvention of the way you view what is to be taken up. What your resources are, what's available to you, what you have to work with. Total reinvention. Nothing up to now has done the job. And it is time to do something else. So, I realize this has been super heavy. Friendly reminder. All transits pass eventually. We've been through... we've been documenting astrology for 4,000 years, and we've survived everything it's predicted. Everything that could be predicted from it, humanity has outlasted. I tend to think the odds are on our side here, but either way, it's not the end of the world. Just the end of the world as we know it. And yeah, there's maybe for some of you there's not so much of a distinction, but there is a difference between survival and living. We will most likely all survive this transit, but do try, if you can, to allow yourself to live through it too. You can't run and hide from this, so it isn't worth trying to do. But this too shall pass, and we will all come out the other side. Anybody who doesn't wasn't meant to in the first place. But that's going to be the end of this video. Again, you'll see this Saturday if you're a patron, Sunday if not. Either way, I'll be back on Tuesday with a Tarot Tuesday video. Until then, hang in there, guys. But I promise, it's going to be okay.